Hey everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 3 of Violet Evergarden. Oh my gosh, this show so far. It's been really good, but it's been so somber from it always bookends itself. It starts out with this really somber scene, and then you get to know Violet and the people that she's around more, and then it just ends with something that just gut punches you. Or at least that's what's happened in the last 2 episodes. But we've gotten more into Violet's kind of character post-war, that she's trying to reintegrate herself into society. And so Hodgins, who is our doctor, our former lieutenant colonel, has kind of let her come into his business, which their whole job as auto memory dolls, which is another fancy word for a typewriter, is that they basically just write letters for people depending on the circumstance. They can make the language more flowery, they can make it more direct. They basically interpret not only what the people that they are customers for want to have in the letters, but they also kind of interpret what the whole point is and try to tailor the letter to fit the cause. And so this kind of job seems easy on the surface, but for a character like Violet, it's going to be incredibly difficult because Violet has been trained to be a weapon. She's been trained to be an emotionless soldier that doesn't concern themselves with anything but blunt, objective details. And so the idea of subjectivity and the idea of emotions and taking that into a play when you create something is something Violet's not used to. And even her calling the typewriter a weapon. And Catalia, which some of you have noted means orchid, which I think is cool, keeping with the flower theme because we have Iris in there as well. She kind of gets what Violet is about, and she's, close with Hodgins, so she kind of is able to ask him more about her and her relationship, and she finds out that Gilbert, the general, and her were close, and that Gilbert was a friend of Hodgins. And I just know that Gilbert's whole story, Gilbert, the character, he's voiced by the same voice actor as Oikawa. I know that he's gonna just make me a wreck. By the end of this, I know he is. It's like this love story is slowly blossoming, which fits the whole flower theme, and slowly unfolding in front of us bit by bit. And I have a feeling that by the end of it, it's just all going to come into full bloom, and it's just going to be beautiful and terribly sad. And I'm just bracing myself, basically. But yeah, so Violet's going to get some training. Catalia said she needed to take a training course. We got introduced to Iris and Erica. I really like Iris and Erica. Iris being not so sure about Violet at first and kind of, not understanding her, and then Erica getting her. So that's really cool that we have that contrast. And then, yeah, every time I hear Hodgins talk, I hear Adam from Skate. So that's a fun time. Totally different character, but the voices are very similar. So, yeah, y'all, I want to know more about old Diet Hard. Old Diet Hard. Diet Hard, Gilbert's brother. I'm going to call him Diet Hard this whole series because that's just how I am. But Diet Hard gives me straight up Dragon Moon vibes, like off Banana Fish. Like, he talks about how they hated his father. He's glad that he's dead. They're Margraves, which, thank you, Space Monkey on Patreon, for establishing this kind of like a marquee, like a symbol of like aristocratic status. But Gilbert doesn't seem like that. And so I just want to know more. And then Hodgins using his monthly wage to get Violet the emerald brooch that was his, that she got for him. So without further ado, let's jump into this episode 3, Violet enrolling in this doll academy. I'm pretty darn excited, y'all. But yeah, let's jump into this, shall we? We are going to start episode 3 of Violet Evergarden here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, Betty! Oh, buddy! Oh, buddy! Yeah, that was really good. I'm not gonna lie, I started getting a little misty-eyed there, towards the end of that. Especially with the brother, because that's, sometimes the letter doesn't have to be long and wordy. It can be short and sweet as long as it conveys the right emotion that you're trying to get across. Man. Okay, so Luculia, we've gotten introduced into her and Spencer, her brother. So I hope that Luculia sticks around as a recurring character because I really like her. She's so sweet, and she's kind of like, she shows up late the first day. She's a little clumsy. Like, she's not perfect. She's got flaws, but she's super sweet and kind, and instantly gravitates towards Violet in there. And I've noticed that most of these girls have like flower names, which is really funny in this world, that they're all named after flowers. But we didn't get anything out of the major this episode. This was all about Violet meeting Luculia. But like lots of little character things at play here, which is really interesting. But the idea of the bell tower being symbolic, I'm not gonna lie, for a split second I thought this was gonna get dark and that the brother was gonna like climb up to the top of the tower and try to jump off and that Violet was gonna have to save him. I've been watching too many other dramatic shows where something like that would happen. But for a second I was like, oh my god, is that gonna happen? Luckily it did not. I love her holding the little lamp, watching him as he reads the letter. Like, that was so sweet. But the idea of this training school, I wish we'd had more with it. I get that it's just for the one episode to make her go and to kind of show her. And I think this is a good example of Violet learning that she's not going to excel at everything. She treats everything so far like a military assignment. Like, everything is militaristic and like, I have a mission, I must accomplish the mission. And it's very, like I said earlier before the episode, very objective. There's not a lot of room of subjectivity and room for interpretive thought. It's all very much by the book. And I think that her going to this school teaches her that no, not everything is by the book. Like, this whole idea, the concept of the auto memory doll, of being a typewriting person in this society, is that you have to decipher, you have to interpret, you have to sugarcoat things if they need to be, and you have to know how to be blunt when you need to be. And so that's something, like Luculia tells her, that's something that she struggles with, is communication, especially beyond just by the book, straightforward military orders. I love the instructor, like the madam. She is, you could tell she has had a very rigorous, old school, traditional upbringing, and she doesn't question Violet. I wonder if she knew, based on Violet's demeanor, that she had been in the military, or that she'd had some kind of military experience. Because she doesn't even bat an eye at the hands or at any of that. She's like, okay. And everyone else seems always surprised when Violet pulls out the mechanical hands. But I think that's another aspect of Violet that makes her seem distanced from humanity, is the mechanical hands. Because if you think about it, with this being a romance, the idea of like hand holding or touching someone's face or touching their arm or their chest or a part of their body, when you have these hands that aren't flesh and blood, that sure, they probably have neurons and things that mechanically connect to her, or sensors, but it's not the same as human touch, right? It's not the same as like flesh contact. So that's an aspect of her that I think makes her seem on the surface less human to another, or maybe makes that communication barrier greater, because you can't have that intimate contact in her case, or she finds that intimate contact maybe lacking. So that's interesting. I need to think about that. But I just thought of how that is something that does make her even more distanced, than normal. But I like that she befriends Luculia. I like that all the girls in this school have different seeming ages and appearances. Keone does a nice job of animating them all different. Like, some of them look older than others. Some of them have big chubby faces. Some of them have very thin, long faces. They all look different, and like they come from different areas, and they come to this school to learn how to be an optimal doll. And I think that's really interesting. I also like this woman, like the bottom of her hair is kind of like colored a little bit differently. And then, so Luculia, her parents have died during the war, and her brother is a veteran that's come home. But she establishes that when he was at war, his faction didn't see a lot of heavy combat like some of the others. So he feels a sense of guilt that he wasn't able to better protect their country where their parents were killed at. So that's a very interesting dynamic that's her and him. And there's so much telling symbolism. Like, when she goes to the apartment and there's the liquor bottles, like in the very corner of the room, you can barely make it out, but you can see like a crate of just empty wine bottles. Like, that's like the drinking has become his like alcoholism has become a problem. And just kind of living in a state of disarray. And she tries to bring like the fresh fruit and vegetables and try to keep a sense of stability. And he's just kind of throwing it out the window. And so she's trying to tell him, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're alive. Thank you. Don't feel down on yourself or like you owe me anything. But we do get an intro and outro, which is great. I love that we have an intro and an ED now, an OP and an ED. But yeah, Violet's thing is you can do all the objective things very well. She can type fast, she can be accurate, she has the grammar, the spelling, but it's the emotional connection that she's lacking with. That's what she needs to work on. And so there's that going forward. Catalia and Benedict, I don't know what their deal is. They're such a very curious pair, right? I get the feeling that by the end of the episode, when she talks to Catalia and Benedict, they're both getting along fine. Like, nothing's a problem. And then as soon as she points out, she's like, weren't you guys arguing? They're right back at it. So either they both have a thing for one another, like romantically, which I thought Catalia was with Hodgins. So either it's that, or they both are friends. They just are the kind of friends that bicker and argue with each other all the time, and they don't want to admit that they're friends. But I was talking to Space Monkey on Patreon, and we were talking about Benedict, and I think some of you others have commented about Benedict too, that he's just like the idea of the men's fashion, like the pants with the laces, like lace-up pants, and and he wears high-heeled shoes, which for that time period wasn't uncommon for men to wear. So he's trying really hard. He's trying really hard to impress the ladies, and Catalia is like, okay. But I really like Benedict's character in Catalia too. I'm not sure what they're arguing about, but Hodgins is like, I can't take it. And Erica's like, don't. They always fight like this. It's fine. But yeah, so I love the idea though that by the end of this, when they graduate, and of course we get the view. They take her. Luculia takes her to the top of Leyden and shows her the view of the city. And of course we get a flashback. Of course we do. And I wanted to go back and see that, but they're on the battlefield, and it's just her and Gilbert. And there's all these guns, and they're both covered in blood and dirt. And he says, I hope one day you'll be able to see the beautiful view in Leyden. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. 28 men died, and it's just the 2 of them left. And they're just like on the edge of the shore burying them. And we don't see his face fully, but... And she finally gets to see the view he was talking about. And the sad thing is that when she's talking about the beautiful view, all she sees is him. It's like, it's like, damn it, no! No! But, so yeah, I like the idea that Violet, she says, I failed in my mission. The idea that Violet is not going to perfectly execute every mission. And Hodgins tries to be like, oh, it's okay. You can still be a doll. You don't have to, the school. And then, of course, Violet's like, well, then why did I go to begin with if that wasn't part of it? And he's like, well, I don't want to tell you it's a learning lesson, but it's a learning lesson. But, he can't exactly come out and say it because he doesn't want to be, patronizing to her or patronizing. What was the purpose? And he's like, And I like on his desk is a rabbit and a bunny, or a cat and a rabbit. That's interesting. And then the little pin is the type keys on the typewriter, and a bird that comes out of it. And you can tell that there's lots of little things that Kiyoani does with the symbolism in the room, in the house. Like, you can tell some things visually without them having to tell us anything at all. Like, they have the picture of the family front and center of them and the mom and dad. And you can see her, it's like sepia tone, and they're all posing there, and he's in his military uniform. But if you look around the house, like, most of the belongings have been sold. It's like, because he came back from the war and doesn't have a job, it doesn't look like he has a job, and the parents are gone, she likely had to sell most of the belongings to help pay bills and pay for their house and everything. So when you look at the house, there's just a couch and like a few chairs, and then the mantle with the picture frame and like some little things here and there, but everything else is very bare bones essential. Like, they've sold everything else. And I think that they don't even have to say a word about it, but visually you can just tell, looking in the house, what all has had to happen. And I love that visual storytelling. I love that when they don't, it's see and don't tell, And I absolutely love that. That's so cool. It's really, really neat. And then, of course, Luculia. I love that Luculia wants to sit down with her and write a letter to the major. She's like, let's do this. Let's write a letter to the major. I don't have to leave till we're done. And then the funny thing is that Violet doesn't know what she wants to say to him. Like, all these letters she's been writing have been very objective reports. They've just been like, here's what I'm doing, Major. This is the school I'm going to. But as far as her emotions towards him, she has no clue what to say. She's like, I don't even know what it means for someone to say that they love me. So how can I respond to that? And that's the whole crux of the show, is her coming to grips. I feel like the whole crux of the show is going to be her finding a way to articulate to the Major her emotions and to be able to say I love you back and to know what it means. And that's where it's going to get us, right? And so instead of Luculia helping her write the letter, she ends up confessing to Violet the circumstance behind her situation at home and how she feels for her brother and she loves her brother. And that's the thing. She basically tells Violet the same thing about her brother that Gilbert told to her. She's like, I love him. And she's like, I don't know how to tell him that I'm just happy that he's here. And in the end of it, Violet just does the most simple and basic thing, because how else do you say that? How else do you tell someone, I'm happy you're alive, thank you? How else do you say that? There's really no other way to say it and do it justice. But that's all that needed to be said. And I love that scene of her just kneeling in front of him. And then him getting beat up and being so frustrated at the bar, outside the bar, like being so frustrated in himself, you can tell. And just feeling ashamed. And then, yeah, God, this whole series is animated gorgeously, but I love the light of the lantern and her standing next to him and then him opening up that letter. And it's something so simple and basic. Happy that you're alive. Then him tearing up, that's what got me. Like, Marlboro. Which is funny, that's a cigarette brand, but And of course, Violet's the perfect person to cry around because she's not going to have a visceral reaction to it. And then her coming back into the house, I love that they're just sitting there having tea, like it's no big deal, Catalia and Benedict. And then, they get reminded they're supposed to be arguing. It's like, you two actually get along perfectly fine. Yeah. It's like, just admit y'all like each other and get over it. So, the only part about this episode that I was like, she got that pin really easily at the end, which I granted that it was a lesson that she learned, but I was like, she got lucky that Luculia had a pretty easy letter to write. And then she got that pin. I guess that was the point, is that, you at least wrote a letter that was decent. Okay. Now you gotta work on the rest of it, Violet. But girl, yeah, this episode got me good. It was really, really nice, but man, I just have a feeling when we get into the stuff with the Major that it's gonna be, it's gonna rip my heart out, isn't it? So, I've had several people tell me about the OVA. So the OVA was made after episode 13 was done, but the OVA actually takes place between episodes 4 and 5. So, what I'm going to do is that next week, we're going to watch episode 4, and then after that, I'm going to watch the OVA, since chronologically, people have been like, oh, if you watch the OVA after episode 4 and before episode 5, it'll make more sense, and it adds to Violet's character development. I'm like, cool, can do. So next week, we'll have episode 4 of Violet Evergarden, and then we'll have the OVA afterwards, and then we'll go to episode 5. So we'll just keep it in that order. So if it seems a little weird, that's why, and I'll talk next week about that as well. But this episode just it's like 30 minutes of just calm and just emotion washing over you in the best way possible. So I'm curious to know your thoughts about this episode and what you all thought as well. You may be an exemplary memory doll. You may be. I'm curious to know how Violet's going to do. She wrote that one letter, which was arguably an easy letter to write in the long run. So I'm curious what's going to happen next with all of that. So I don't know. But I'm curious to know your thoughts about the episode. Please, no spoilers, but I hope you all enjoyed this reaction. And yeah, next week, we'll do episode 4 of Violet Evergarden. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you all again real soon with more Violet Evergarden. Bye.